Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming back. I understand there are 4 high school students from Aragon High School, and if you would just stand or wave or whatever, welcome. They're starting a youth chapter with the San Mateo chapter, and a lot of us older folks are here because of the next generation, but even better is having your generation out there on your own behalf, so go for it. All right, other high school students want to wave? Yay, all right. Okay. Okay, so this is the Getting a Bill Passed session. We have the bill out. I really didn't think I was going to be having that already, and we have this big job now to move it through Congress. So we're going to do some very basic things, and some of you who have been around a while might be like going, why are you doing that? But we need everybody up to speed, and it's not all so basic. So what I want to do is talk about how a bill goes through Congress, which is really funny because it just brings back 2nd grade for me, and what to do with the levers of political will. And I'll explain what those are when I get to them. And then a chance for you to look at what is it that you're going away from here planning to do next. But before I launch into that, there's a few things I want to say that I was realizing actually early this morning that I wanted to say just ahead of all of that. So about how I think things are changed by having a bill. One piece of advice almost I have for you is enjoy the optimism of this particular phase. Some of last year felt like wandering in the dark. Were we ever going to get the bill out, especially if those of us who were a little closer to watching it go up and down on the roller coaster. So enjoy this phase. It's a good time to bring people in and get them going and get people connected. Because I predict that there will be times when we feel stuck again in this process, and you'll graphically see why when we review what it takes to get a bill through. And then a second thing that I've been thinking about is in our organization, we are really in a different phase now. When we started, we were a tiny little group with people spread out all across the country, and we made this space and deliberately, set about empowering volunteers to go out and do things. And if you had an idea, go do it. That was what Mark would say. Great idea, what are you going to do about it? And you could be pretty sure back then when we were tiny that there probably wasn't anybody else in the organization trying to do that thing that you had the idea about. So you didn't have to worry about tripping over other people too much. It's different now. We're not a tiny little organization. We have more than 400 chapters in the United States. We are still small compared to Big Green. We're still quite small, but our influence is much larger and our credibility is much higher because we got to this milestone. And so the different phases, like members of Congress volunteers are very key and constituents are very key to them, but they're also used to dealing with staff. Big green organizations that aren't full of empowered volunteers are used to dealing with staff. And so there are conversations that can only happen at the national level through our DC office. And that's why we have them, is so they can do that. Because we have to be in those rooms when those groups are talking to each other. And so sometimes we're in this situation where our DC folks are doing stuff and they can't tell us about it. You deserve to know because you're that empowered, but they can't tell you everything. So you're going to bump into that more and more. And I'm like completely trying to figure out in my role of managing volunteers and moving us forward, how we keep you as empowered as possible while we also deal in this reality that DC is a different world than what we live in. Okay, so we need you to keep going and to keep going in your, like where you really have your superpowers is as constituents. Keep going. You are the experts on your member of Congress. We don't have like a huge lobbying staff, and there are 535 of them. So you are completely important in building that relationship with your members of Congress. And in your local community, you are the experts. And in your states, you are the experts on how to build that political will. So those are your superpowers. Keep going. When you run into places where you have a contact at the national level, because you guys have contacts all over the place, or you have a really great idea about something that could happen in another congressional office or another state, or with a major organization, what we want you to do is talk to either your regional coordinator or the people in the DC staff who are in charge of those areas. Because at this point, you don't know if you launch off and start talking to Michael Brune, whether you're tripping up something somebody else is doing. So does that make sense to you? Okay, great, that's what we need. Okay, third thing I wanted to say is Climate Solutions Caucus. You're not hearing so much about them right now, are you? Just as a reminder for folks who haven't been around for this journey through the last year or before, the Climate Solutions Caucus is a caucus, a group of members of the House of Representatives who join in equal numbers of Republicans and Democrats. So for a Democrat to join, there has to be a Republican. And they created a space to have conversations about climate solutions and to talk to each other. They did not then, and they do not exist to pass carbon fee and dividend. But that caucus has been a tremendously useful stepping stone for us to bill introduction. So in the election, Representative Deutsch was a Democrat from Florida who was a co-chair with Representative Curbelo, the Republican. Representative Curbelo, we were sad that he lost his race. And Representative Deutsch, he's been focused on getting the bill out. I like his priorities. We don't know yet what exactly is happening with the Climate Solutions Caucus. I am assuming that that will be reestablished, and he will figure out how to get it back into balance of Republicans and Democrats, and he will figure out who the next chair is that's Republican with him. But for right now, we're not hearing much. Deutsch is focused on the bill, and Representative Rooney, and that's great. That's also what we need to do, is be focused on the bill. And ultimately, I think when they get the Climate Solutions Caucus organized again, it may still be a very useful stepping stone for us, but you'll hear a lot more, obviously, about the bill than the Climate Solutions Caucus. Okay, so now, let's go back to, why is it second grade for me? Let's go back to second grade when we learned about how a bill gets through Congress. Turn the clicker on. Maybe it's that side. Yes. Yes. Oh, that's enough of me. All right, we already did that. Okay. I'm slightly ahead of myself now. So we need to know, like, what we're in for. And the second grade joke for me is my teacher didn't know what to do with me when I was in second grade because I learned everything too fast. And so she stuck me in the book room with a civics book and told me to read the chapters and answer the questions, and it was so boring. So I'm really scared you're going to end up bored because I was very bored then. Okay, here's the short version. And you probably know this. A bill is introduced in either the House or the Senate, or it could be both. It's assigned to a committee, or it could be more than one committee. If the committee doesn't ever vote on it, the bill dies. The committee can mark up the bill by amending it and then vote on it, so it gets changed in committee often. If the bill passes on a committee vote, it goes to the full House or Senate for a vote. If it passes, then it goes to the other chamber, where it goes through that same committee process again. If both chambers pass the bill, it goes to the president. If they pass the same bill. If they pass different versions of that bill, then it goes to a conference committee, and the conference committee reaches agreement on a joint version. If they do, it goes to the president. Do you hear all those ifs? If the president doesn't approve the bill, doesn't sign it, Congress can try to override the veto by a 2/3 vote. So that's the overview. I'm going to do like 7 minutes on a little more detail there. And all of this came from Congress 101. And I'm going to quote Taylor, who was presenting in November, where she said, "Hold your questions to the end because we won't have time for them." Okay, introducing a bill. Any member of Congress can introduce a bill. Other members can join on as sponsors. How did I end up there? That is not the beginning. There we go. So then the bill is referred to the appropriate committee by the Speaker of the House. And our bill was introduced in the House, and it's in the Ways and Means Committee. Is there a second one, Tony? Okay, yeah, the one that always puzzled me is energy and commerce makes sense. Foreign affairs, I'm like, why? Do you know why it's in foreign affairs? Border adjustment, that's the foreign part. Okay, see, you guys all knew that. All right. And it sometimes can get split so that different parts are sent to different committees. The Speaker of the House can set time limits on those committees, and failure to act on a bill is the equivalent to killing it. But it's possible to have a thing called a discharge petition, signed by, and it takes a lot, the majority of the House membership, which is 218 people. They can be used to force the release of a bill from committee. Okay. I think that's the one I just did. Here we go. A little more about committees. When the bill gets there, comments are often requested from government agencies, and the bill can end up in a subcommittee. They may hold hearings, all right? And that's an official meeting or session of the Senate, House, or Joint or Special Committee. That's different from the briefings that we've held for Congress. A hearing is they hold it, and it's official. Subcommittees can report their findings, and then there's a vote, we hope, by the full committee. And that's called ordered to be reported. Okay. They can hold a markup session during which it makes revisions and additions. And if there are a lot of revisions made, the committee can order sort of a fresh, instead of editing the draft, they can just say, make us a clean bill. Okay. In the House, most bills go to the Rules Committee before it goes to the floor. So the floor is, when they talk about the floor, that's the whole chamber. And the Rules Committee adopts the rules that will govern it. Okay. All right. When it gets to the floor, it's got to get placed on the calendar. And in the House, bills are usually placed on calendars in the order in which they're reported, but they don't usually come to the floor in that order, and some bills actually don't reach the floor at all. So it's the Speaker of the House and the Majority Leader who decide what will reach the floor and when. So obviously, we want to have good relationships with them. A discharge position can also be used there to get it to the floor. In the Senate, legislation is placed on the legislative calendar, and scheduling of legislation is the job of the Majority Leader, and bills can be brought to the floor whenever a majority of the Senate chooses. The Senate and the House also do debate differently, okay? And you're probably familiar with this. Debate in the House is limited by the rules made by the Rules Committee, and it's guided by the sponsoring committee, and the time is equally divided between proponents and opponents. The committee will decide how much time each person gets, and amendments must be germane. They must pertain to the subject of the bill. So no riders, no unrelated things are allowed in the House. The Senate, however, has unlimited debate, as we know, unless what they call cloture is invoked, and that's where they vote to end a filibuster, right? And that takes 60 votes. So that's why we often say that something needs 60 votes in the Senate to get passed rather than a majority. The other thing that's interesting in the Senate is that riders can be offered, and so somebody could decide to stick on in the Senate an entire other bill that has nothing to do with the bill in the Senate. And then they vote. So the bill is voted on, And if it's passed, as I said earlier, it goes to the other chamber, unless that other chamber already has a similar, a companion bill under consideration. If either the House or the Senate doesn't pass the bill, then it dies. If the House and the Senate pass the same bill, it goes to the President. If the House and the Senate pass different bills, they're sent to a conference committee, and most major legislation goes to a conference committee. So let's look at that. To make a conference committee, members from each chamber form that, and they're there to work out the differences. So that's a negotiation. And who gets on there is usually senior members appointed by the presiding officers of the committee that had the bill. So the committees that worked on that bill are the people who get to put people on the conference committee. If the conference committee reaches a compromise, then it's going to prepare a written conference report, and that's going to go to each chamber. And in a sense, that's the thing that they then vote on to adopt the bill. So that conference report has to be approved by both the House and the Senate. Are we still breathing out there? or have you gone to sleep? I don't know which. I can't tell. It's like, oh my gosh, we have to do this? That's kind of my feeling as I read it. All right, but let's assume it gets passed, right? Good news. All right, the conference committee bill got passed. And approval by both the House and the Senate means that. So then the bill goes to the President for review. A bill becomes law if it's signed by the President, or if they send it to the President while the Congress is going to be in session for more than 10 days, and the President doesn't bother to sign it, but Congress is still in session, it's considered enacted without his signature. But if they do this in the last days of the Congress, and Congress is about to adjourn, and the President doesn't sign it, then that's a pocket veto. It doesn't become law. You don't have to remember all this stuff. It's just looking ahead a little bit. And then if it's vetoed, it goes back to Congress with a note listing his or her reasons. And Congress can attempt to override that with a vote of 2/3 of those present. Okay. All right, so we're in for quite a journey, aren't we? Yeah. We are in a next phase. It's quite a journey, and we're going to do this. This is why I said yesterday, I don't know how long it's going to take. We're going to do this as fast as we can. But that's just the overview of what's ahead, and I'm really not going to take questions. Okay. You know why, don't you? Because I don't know the answers yet. I am not a parliamentarian, not in my skill set. I've learned to lean on other people. Okay, so what I want to look at next is this handout that we sent, because what is it we have to do? We have to build a lot of political will. We have to get a lot of members of Congress to decide to persist with this, in addition to putting their name on it. So what I want to do here is, we have 4 pages here, and it could, to those of you who are used to action sheets, it kind of looks like a very long action sheet, doesn't it? And what I want to do is give you the summary, which is the top 2/3 of page 1, and then the next sections are focused on what we call the levers of political will. So for those of you who are getting used to CCL, we decided to categorize the kinds of actions we take to build support for legislation and label them levers of political will, because a lever is used to lift a heavy object, and Congress is kind of heavy. All right, so 5 levers. We have a media lever. We have a lobbying lever. That's where you meet with your members of Congress. We have a grass tops. So grass tops refers to the leaders in your community and your state. So the influential people, the people where your member of Congress goes, oh, the CEO of my biggest company in my district is for this. I like that. Grassroots outreach, that's where you get lots and lots and lots of constituents to communicate with the member of Congress. And chapter development is a lever because if we don't have people to do all the other 4 things, nothing happens. So that's a very important lever. All right, so those are our levers of political will, and there are quite a lot of suggestions here for things to focus on. I want us to ask you to think about relating to the rest of this document in 2 different ways. One way that I encourage you to relate to it is to think, as we're talking about it, what will light me up? That's the way Mark says it. I think of it as what will be satisfying to do, right? And for me, like, some things are satisfying because I'm using skills I already have, and I know I enjoy using them. You know, so play to your strengths, that's satisfying. Sometimes it's satisfying to learn something new. So, like, I'm not much of a Facebook person, and if you were listening on Thursday night when we went through what we want people to do when the bill dropped, it's like all the people like me who don't use Facebook much, but you have a page because you want to know what your kids are doing or your high school friends are doing from way back in the day. We encourage, you know, it's like we asked you to go there and like and share CCL's post. And so I went and did that, and that wasn't totally new to me, but it was satisfying because I was doing something I don't usually do, and then I found out it wasn't that hard. So then since I also have a Twitter account that I never use, it's like, oh, I bet it only takes me 5 minutes to actually tweet my thanks like we tell people to do. So new things are satisfying. Then I got called a troll, and and I was like, yes! So I had a new experience, satisfying. And then the other kind of satisfaction that comes for me every day is like whether I am enjoying that thing I'm doing for CCL in that moment, I know what I'm doing matters. So there's satisfaction from that. So relate to this list by thinking about what is going to be satisfying to you, because that's the only way to hang in through the ups and downs we're going to have. All right, the other way I encourage you to relate to this, especially for those of you who have been around a while and you already know what it is you want to do probably, you might get a few ideas off of this. I would like you to think about how much of this can you get your whole group to be capable of doing? Like, can your group grow in capacity to do most of this? Can your group grow in capacity from being able to just do like part of it to being able to do twice as much? Even if you're not, and actually especially if you're not the group leader, I invite you to think about it that way. Is there a little nudge or suggestion you can make to somebody you know in your group that might set them in motion on one of these things that your group isn't able to do? Or is there somebody you can bring in? So that's the other way I encourage that you relate to this, because nobody's going to do all this by themselves. 10 o'clock already. Okay. So, you're still there. Good. Here's the overview then. All right, and this shouldn't be real surprising to you, but we put grow your chapter at the top because of what I just said, and because we have that much we need to do. And basically, that means paying a lot of attention to new folks coming in and doing these kinds of reviews where you cover the basics so that so that nobody's left out because they're back trying to figure out what's CFD, what's an MOC, what's an LTE. Like take some time for either to help people learn the acronyms that we use or stop using them. This is a good time to recontact your list. It's a good time to think about how you share the work. So grow your chapter, because we are getting tons of new people. If you heard me on Thursday, it was like 1,300 people have been on our introductory call, either live or recorded, since the bill dropped in November, and that's like 2.5 times as much as we had in the same period last year. Like, a lot of people are interested. Okay, then we hit the lobbying lever as our second top action. So if you don't have a liaison, think about who could do that role. And a liaison to a member of Congress is the point person who works with the scheduler and the energy and environment aide and the member themselves and is the face of your group to them. Because it's confusing to staff in congressional offices if 4 people from CCL say, I'd like to have a meeting to you. It's not just confusing, it's annoying. So we have one person who fills that role, and they're supported by a team, ideally. Okay. So that's the liaison role. So if there's not a liaison in your district to your member of Congress, and if you're not sure, you talk to your state coordinator or your regional coordinator. Think about who could do that role, and you want it to be somebody who's, since you're building a relationship, ideally somebody who you're pretty sure is going to stick around for a while and has some good people skills. All right, so you don't want to put somebody in the liaison role who doesn't know how to listen, or who doesn't, that you're not sure yet is going to be there for a while. So it's a balance. You don't want to rush into the role, but you also want to fill the role. Okay. Third thing is prioritize the grassroots and the grass tops. I think we've been talking about that a lot. We have this challenge of 2,000 outreach events by the end of April out there, which I'm sure you guys can blow past, led by California, of course. And then just, start easy and grow. Like, this can feel overwhelming, so again, play to your strengths as a group and then build on it. Okay, so I'm just going to pause and see if there's a few questions there. Then we're going to go through the chapter development section, the lobbying section, and give you a chance to look at those and talk to somebody about where might you be interested. What are those places of satisfaction or where you can help your chapter develop further? But first, let's just pause and see, because I have just talked way too much. What questions, if there are any now, around priorities? And you can just come up to the mic, and then that'll be great.
Hi, I'm Martin Delson from San Jose. I did not understand when you said don't make any action with respect to your representative without coordinating it. For example, my representative in Congress is Sol Lofgren. Should I not write her, just send her a letter through her email application and say, I'm in favor, please support this bill?
I'm so glad you asked that question. So as a constituent, yes, write her. And we want them to get lots of letters from constituents, and get your friends and neighbors to write, and use the contact form. And so we want lots of constituents making those requests. What we don't want is like that you and somebody else say, can I have a meeting with you?
Got it.
Yeah.
And can I make a suggestion? I haven't heard this talked about anywhere. I have the feeling, being here in San Jose, that it's almost certain that our representatives and senators will vote for this bill when it comes to the floor.
Good.
Or if it comes. However, I have relatives that live in states that have Republican representatives and also senators, and I know that I have my sisters and brothers. If I were to ask them to send a letter to their Republican senator, or to fill out the form, that they would do so. And I think that many of us here probably have those kinds of relationships, and I think that we ought to urge people here to make use of relationships in other districts that may not be so strongly supportive of this legislation.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Yes, you are completely right about that. And that is part of helping us grow, is to go outside of your own neighborhood for that. Yeah.
How important is it to get CCL representation in Nancy Pelosi's district?
We do have a liaison and a lot of good work happening in Nancy Pelosi's district.
Okay.
Yeah, and they're probably here, correct? It is very important, and so love up your San Francisco group.
I have a question about messaging. So we're very enthusiastic about the bill, but likely it will be a different version of that bill, like if it gets passed, given everything that it would go through. So is there a danger where we're saying yay in the bill, and then down the road it's different, significantly different? And how do we work with tempering expectations while being really positive. And also the bipartisan push, there's something like 5 or 6 Democrats right now and only 1 Republican. Brian Fitzpatrick isn't on the bill right now. How do we message around that? The fact that
Okay.
it's bipartisan, but right now it's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, all right, you gave me 2 questions, and I have a hard time holding 2 things in my head at once. What was the first one again, Bill?
Yeah,
Managing expectations. Oh, yeah. Okay, so yes, we do think about that on staff and try to look ahead and figure out what's going to come, and yet a lot of it we can't look ahead and know. It is possible that this bill could end up to be something that we don't like. We're going to fight like crazy that doesn't happen, of course, and you're going to fight like crazy that doesn't happen. It's one reason why already we don't tend to call it our bill, but the bill. And I encourage you to do that, so that it is a thing that we are all in on, but it actually does belong to Congress, not to us. And our highest thing remains livable political will for a livable planet. And if this bill stops being that, and we need to, we'll tell you, tell you, ask you, yeah. That's very helpful. Yeah, yeah. And then you had a different question. Okay, yeah, all right, so Representative Deutsch and Representative Rooney wanted to get this bill out quickly, and so they moved ahead. We are confident that there will be other Republican sponsors, and this is one of those areas where a lot goes on in Washington, D.C. in confidence that our staff is mostly part of, but not always part of, because D.C. is a really interesting place. So there may be more to that story, but I really can't tell you. And sometimes I don't even know it myself. But to me, it's really good that they were in a hurry to get that out. And it will build. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. We could just do questions this whole rest of the time, couldn't we? And I don't want to ignore the mic. No, I don't. I want you to go.
Okay. Yeah, hi, my name's Kavai. I'm from San Carlos, so the Silicon Valley North chapter. And I think the main question I have, this all makes sense to me in a relatively normal political state of affairs where people discuss things like rational individuals, but that's not really the moment we're living in. And so to me, the things that I notice that carry the most momentum are the things that capture public imagination in a way that leads almost to hysteria, not because I love it, but because those are the things that seem like they still move and don't die in committee or don't die quietly behind the scenes. So if you look at something like, for instance, when we got to the moment in which the Affordable Care Act was at the moment of being completely repealed, what, in my opinion, probably pushed that away was when people were showing up at wherever their public representatives were showing up, whether that was just a community meeting, if they were showing up at this place or that place, people were showing up and chanting, "Do your job." They're like locking themselves to each other and making those sorts of things happen to the point where people could not ignore it, right? And I don't think that's the most effective way for things to really move forward. I prefer the way we do it in Citizens Climate Lobby, but I get scared that once we have a bill like this here, even with all of those levers of political will, it seems like there's kind of the missing element of I don't know if you would call it political imagination, right? But crossing the boundary to the point where people can't ignore it, as opposed to letting it quietly die because we're polite and we're trying to move things in a rational way, if that makes sense. So. Good question.
Yeah, this is this is why I like taking questions, because really smart things come up, and it reminds me sometimes of things I forgot to say. One piece that's also new that we're working on a lot is the idea that we need to get better at mobilizing. And so our model has been building relationships, right? That's our bread and butter. We build relationships with people and bring them along, and slow and steady has, I think, actually worked quite well to this point. But we're in a different stage now, and this isn't exactly what you were talking about, but we need to also increase our capacity to turn people out on short notice to flood Congress with phone calls, or all go to the district office and drop off, 500 letters or do something. And we're starting to think about, are there things that we might do with larger numbers that aren't protests, because that's not our style, but we're looking for creative ideas, and if you have them, I want them, of how consistent with our values we can catch people's attention. So we're working on that very much, and I think our marketing people are also thinking about that. So thank you. And this is one of those places where, like our volunteers, like, you are a tremendous source of ideas, and we want those still. Like, even while one part of me says, leave some things to staff that you didn't used to leave to staff, I also still want you feeding your creative ideas to staff. We have to be both very disciplined and let our staff do the kinds of things staff has to do, and very creative and empowered still. So thank you for that. Okay, do you want to add anything, Tony? Am I doing good? All right, Leslie? Okay, glad I asked. Leslie's our Director of Marketing, and I'm glad you're applauding her.
Hey. So that was a great question, and I think you've really identified the central crux of what we're thinking about in marketing right now is, I came on board a year ago, and we really needed to put into place a lot of the building blocks that we needed around a brand, which was what's our message, consistent message, how are we going to look and feel, and we did that. And this year we're in a different place. We have a bill. We need to get it passed. We've got great from the ground up operations, and there's a real opportunity for us to put a top-down strategy in terms of how do we get the word out in a broader fashion, in an impactful way, and how do we do that in a way that's true to our brand. So on staff, we really have shifted our operations on the marketing team and our focus to really tackle those questions, and we're doing a lot more. The first basis is we're doing a lot more proactive media outreach than we've done in the past, and that's still coming together. So these are pieces that are coming together. They have not seen fruition yet, but we're doing a lot more media outreach, and we're ready in a way that we haven't been to take advantage of media opportunities as they come up. We're also thinking about, what is the most interesting thing that we have to say out in the public, and it's interesting to a lot of people that we have Republicans, right? So that points us in a certain direction. People, when we talk to the media, frankly, people are interested in hearing from Representative Rooney, right? That's sort of the interesting piece that we are bringing to the table right now to the climate discussion, and so we're starting to figure out what those things are. Additionally, we have opportunities in social media that are unrealized, right, of ways for us to raise our voices and be public in ways that we haven't. So these are really important questions that we're tackling. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to take your question, and I see Mary coming, and I'm going to take hers, and then I'm going to give you a little chance to just spend some time looking at this sheet, seeing what's on there, and then we'll come back to a little Q&A. So,
David Kuhnhart from Corte Madera. Senate side, I presume that the priority now is to find a replacement for Senator Jeff Flake and have a Republican...
A bunch of them.
Or a bunch of them. Where is that effort to find a Republican senator being focused, and is there anything that we in California can do to help on that? And then second question is scoring. Does a revenue-raising bill have to be scored, and if so, where in the process does that take place? Thank you.
It does have to be scored. When the last time Danny was asked, I think he didn't know when it would be happening. Yeah. We are looking at, based on what we hear from our folks in the field about where they're making progress with Republican senators, and what we hear from our DC team, and setting some priorities. And some priorities for senators for our work and for building those relationships up are also based on, Kentucky's a no-brainer. Senator McConnell, we need to get as sympathetic as possible. So yeah, we are working on that. And we'll be thinking about how can we get some particular states some extra help in their organizing around particular senators. What could California do?
That's what I was, that's what I was.
What's that?
I had a couple thoughts about that.
Okay, go ahead, Mary.
All right, so bearing in mind what Madeleine said about expanding our capacity to be able to mobilize, which means having a lot of really strong relationships with our partners in the bipartisan space that we all value so much. And the reason why I wanted yesterday to invoke our core values is that I think CCL, and especially those of us in California, because we have such a strong presence nationally, to really redefine how mobilization happens. And this is going to be our challenge, I think, this year, is how do we mobilize in a very clearly bipartisan way and find areas of interest in the way that our panel yesterday afternoon talked about. So I think what I wanted to urge all of us to be thinking about in our chapters and all group leaders and regional coordinators is how to be responsive to what Madeleine was saying about being prepared to mobilize large numbers of people in our representatives' offices and in other appropriate kinds of venues. But I think it's going to be largely up to us to think about what those venues are, because I continue to feel like this legislative battle that's going to happen is really new territory for CCL, and to be able to wage that battle in a bipartisan space is hugely unusual. So it's up to us. I don't know who else is doing that visibly. So.
Thank you. I want to say that I've really appreciated California's contributions to the entire effort across the country. This is something you have a history of doing already, so please take Mary up on her challenge. There are folks in this room who figured out that we needed to get better at being able to reach for business leaders and set about learning how to do that and sharing that. And I'm grateful for that. There are folks in this room, I believe, who were part of the Presenters Action Team who figured out that we needed to provide more support to volunteers who present, and they built that action team into something that reaches nationwide and provides support beyond what staff does. There are people in California, if not in this room, could be, I get my Southern and Northern California mixed up, sorry, who felt like getting young people engaged in getting resolutions from school boards, as you heard yesterday. That's a California initiative that is going nationwide. And that is something that you folks have been great about doing, and I will support. I want you, again, to, when you have nationwide plans, you want to check in with staff, but that augments what we can get done hugely when you guys take on projects like that. And figuring out mobilizing is another one of those places. We already had a California try to figure out phone banking, but I think we're not going too far with that right now. Phone banking in that, like, where we sign people up to, call. Anyway, I don't have to explain that. Okay, I am going to give you now just a few minutes to peruse this sheet, and remember, look at it from the point of view of what would be satisfying to me to do, big or small, or what can I do to extend the capacity of my group to work in that area? Like, do you know somebody? And just, I'm gonna give you like just 3 minutes to look at it yourself there, and then I'm gonna invite you to talk to somebody about what you came up with. Are those today's sheets or yesterday's sheets? Shh. It's always the shh that works. Okay, Carl.
Great. Well, great session. Thank you for the specifics. I mean, this is really great. We need it now. And there's one idea I've been thinking about, and I actually want to get sort of the group thought on it, which is a lot of us have a lot of friends and acquaintances and family members and such who say things like, wow, that's so great that you're doing that, and I wish I had time, and all these things, and
Raise your hand if that's ever happened.
yeah. That's right. Glad you're saving the world because I'm busy doing something else. And but And yet, with many of those people, there's a sense that I have that they would be willing to do something, you know, even if it was 5 minutes a month, you know. And so I've been thinking about how do we enable those somethings to happen on a really broad basis. And it seems like now that we have a bill is when it's especially important. So a thought I had, I'll just throw it out there and we can maybe crowdsource this, is if there was a kind of a Google form, simple survey type thing, but it was uniform across all of CCL, well, internationally, not just US, or maybe we limit it to US, that each of us could send out to like everybody we know, you know, kind of a thing, and say, you know, I know you're not like officially a CCL volunteer, but you know, there's going to be a point in the future where if you're willing to spend 5 minutes a month on this simple activity that I'll send you a link and you can click it, and it's going to be super simple, to sort of build that database of extra people that are, I guess a sort of a related idea is that, you know, there's like people that have actually clicked the join button and are CCL people, quote unquote. And then I think there's this like giant concentric circle of interested parties that are just outside that boundary that are in our networks, and ideas for how we can kind of engage them would be helpful.
Great. We'll work on putting that out and keep thinking, Carl. One of the things I do suggest always is invite people to do something with you. Like, you know, thank you for all that appreciation. You know, would you like to come to a meeting one time? Or how about we both pull out our phones and call our member of Congress right now? Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
Over here.
Hi, Steve Levin from Silicon Valley North and Business Climate Leaders. This is so great, and I'm so proud, as I know we all are, of our brand of being what I would call relationship-oriented and eminently reasonable. We are so reasonable. And the problem with being reasonable, as a prior questioner said, is it doesn't get a lot of attention from those who are in their comfort zone and don't want to leave. So I want to plant a seed, and maybe you've already thought of this, that we see Citizens Climate Lobby as part of a much larger ecosystem. And we are the friendly cop. We're the one they all want to come to. And then there are some unfriendly cops who are activists, who are protesting, who are doing sit-ins, who are acting up, and provide the incentive for people to turn to the friendly cops, us, with our reasonable solution. So I want to say, if you are already secretly coordinating with these activist organizations so that they create the poll for us, do not tell us. You can deny it right now. But if you're not, maybe we should. Maybe we need to see CCL not as an island and as the whole thing, but as a critical, important organization in a much larger ecosystem of activism. And we need other activists to generate the discomfort, which we can then relieve through our reasonable solution. What do you think?
Nicely said. Thank you.
Good denying.
All right, so we're going to do you. We're going to get to you. But you have to be very short, because I think I know what you're going to say. And we're going to get to you.
Thomas Harris, Santa Rosa. Question that might go off of what Carl was saying. I heard about a monthly call where people in your area can call every month, the
Yes.
MOC. That's supposed to be relatively simple. I don't know if you have more details.
Yeah, so in some places they call that the Grand Canyon Project, and we are working on finding out what's working best in the states that have been trying that, or the districts, and rolling that out to you all. And it is the idea that you get a list of, say, 5 people for each day of the week, for each day of the month. All right, so that's about, that if you do 5 and there's about 20 weekdays, that's about 100 people. But they commit to, like I'm committed to calling my senator on the 2nd Wednesday every month. And I get a reminder and the phone number, and then I call, and then I click a form, that reports my call, and we're working on that. And that steady, the idea is not to shut them down and flood them, it's a steady trickle, but the other advantage of that is when we need the flood, those people are trained and over their fear of calling. And it's still hard to get them to call people. Even even to get me to stop what I'm doing and call is hard.
Any idea on timing for that rollout?
I'll say in the next 2 months. It's a little hard to make a commitment. I never know what's coming. Okay, real quick.
Hi, my name is Tim Wee, Silicon Valley North, and I have an invitation for any volunteers who are interested in helping me. I'm going to be bicycling from here to Boston over 3 months, starting February 22nd, and I'm talking about climate change across the country. I'd like to do 90 presentations in 90 days, but I need some help putting those the presentations I've pretty much got ready, but I need help finding people along my route. So if anyone's interested in just being a base station for me, you can pick a segment of my route and find people that I can talk to as I pass through their community.
Do you promise to file field reports?
Yeah, I'll be posting every day.
Okay, thanks. Perfect. Thank you, Tim.
Oh, contact me. Go to zerow.org, zerow.org. It has my contact information. You can read about my ride there. And my email address is tim@zerow.org. Thank you.
Okay.
This is a nuts and bolts question that's sort of a follow-up to what Carl was saying about the people out there that I know. I want to tell them to go to the CCL website and send a message to their congressperson, but I also want to tell them that they won't get on any lists, unless they click. Is that true? Okay.
Madeleine, actually, if you...
Okay, Tony's going to correct me.
When you write Congress or call Congress, there is a checkbox that you can check that says, no to the answer of would you like to be added to CCL's list. If they do that, then they will be in our database, but they will be marked as email opt-out, and so they won't receive any email.
Yay, Tony. Okay, you're gonna be the last one. Sorry.
I've got a real short one.
Yeah, no, but I'm behind. Sorry.
I guess I have sort of the opposite comment of the question two people before me. So the Big Green is rather large, and they are good at mobilizing, but they're also very partisan. So can you comment on what the possible benefits or disadvantages would be of connecting with Big Green?
We are connecting with Big Green. That's what our DC team works on doing, and they are talking with them, and there's all layers of support from those groups. And so I do hope that at strategic times, some of them will mobilize their folks.
Can you clarify what is
Sure.
Big Green? Sierra Club, NRDC,
EDF. Environmental Defense Fund, National Resources Defense Council, the very large environmental groups that have been around for decades as opposed to us.
Now, with clarification, are you discouraging local chapters from talking to local chapters of Big Green?
No, not at all. I really encourage you to build a good relationship with your local Sierra Club or Nature Conservancy or Audubon, or some of the Big Greens don't actually have local chapters, but the ones that do, definitely network and build a relationship with your local folks. Understand that those local groups usually can't endorse, but what they can do is educate and understand and support what we're doing to their nationals. So we do want you to do that. We just don't want you to contact the top people. Okay, I'm going to move on. I already made the other guys sit down, so as much as I'd love to say yes, there are people here, Tony Cerna, Leslie Beatty, me, that you can contact with those ideas or questions, or your regional coordinators. So please do keep sending those ideas and questions to us. We want you to have what you need. Okay, so I got 10 minutes, and I have a few closing thoughts that I am saving time for, and then I'm going to leave you because Linnea and I have to run off to the airport. right about the time your breakouts are starting, and I'm trying to beat the snowstorm. Thank you to the people who have offered to let me stay here for the next week and try to avoid the weather, but I'm a macho girl. I'm going to tough it out. Okay, so I want to talk about leadership, persistence, and hope. So, we did that. Here's how I think about leadership. To me, at its heart, leadership isn't a title, it's a commitment. And it's a commitment to help things go well wherever you are. And you chose to be here this weekend, right? Working on solutions. So to me, that makes you a leader. That's why yesterday's session was a leadership session. It didn't have to do with whether you had a role or a title. You could have spent your time this weekend doing a million other things, the laundry, yelling at the TV, or savoring the beautiful nature you have here, all kinds of things. But you came here. So that to me is why you're a leader and why I see you that. And you're my favorite kind of people to be around. So thanks for giving me that chance to be here. For persistence, I want to show you a little video. And I got this from Mary Selkirk. There's really no better model for persistence than the people who worked in the civil rights movement. This is from Samantha Bee's Full Frontal comedy show, and that was broadcast on February 15th, 2017. I never get tired of watching that. All right, so you're also the people who do the day in and day out work, getting one more endorsement, one more person to a meeting, one more field report filed, et cetera. So that's what we did to get the bill out, and that's what we're going to keep doing till it's passed. Okay, so lastly, there's hope. The outlook for our planet sometimes can feel really discouraging. There's a lot of dysfunction in our government. There's a lot of signals that the climate impacts are getting worse. So what about hope? Well, I love this article by Frances Moore LePay that's from last fall, and I'm just sharing a few bits from it. She wrote, "I've been called a hope fiend, and I cop to it. More than ever, hope isn't just a nice feeling we're lucky to experience from time to time. No, hope has become a requirement, as despair is our worst enemy." So let me share a few things this fiend has learned about hope. First, it's work. Yes, I know that hope and effort don't seem to go together, but think about it. A lot of good things in life, from a good meal to a good marriage, entail work, sometimes a lot of work. Yet when we pause to savor them, we know it's been worth it. And here's the good news. I discovered that hope starts with one realization. Given that the nature of life is continuous change in which we're all connected, it's simply not possible to know what's possible. It's in this very unknowing that hope lives. Precisely because I can't be certain, I'm free. I'm free to go for the world I really want. It's in this very unknowing that hope lives. Precisely because I can't be certain, I'm free. I'm free to go for the world that I really want. So thanks for going there with me. I'm going to be heading out. Keep it up, California. You are a shining light. And I'll see you in the southern part of the state next month.
Give a hand to Madeleine.
All right.
So we hope you get home.
I'll be in good hands if I don't, wherever I am.
Right.